So, hello everybody and welcome back to another CX Today video. I'm your host Floyd and today I'm glad to be on the platform to discuss all things Synthflow and AI voice agents. So today I'm joined by Hakob, so thank you for coming on to our platform today. I hope you're keeping well. So yeah, just to crack on then, I think it's always best if you kind of introduce yourself to our audience, explain what Synthflow does and where you fit in the CX space.
Thanks, Lloyd. Thanks for having me here. Happy to share some insights on the market and Synthflow as well. So I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO at Synthflow AI. What Synthflow AI does, it's basically an open platform for building voice AI agents for enterprises, for small, medium-sized companies to enterprises. What's unique about Synthflow is that we're a relatively young company that started around 2 years ago, and our technology stack has been based on LLMs from day one. So we are like an LLM-native company, and our entire technology and work so far has been focused around building voice AI, and we don't do anything else. We only focus on voice AI. As it turned out, and people familiar with the space know, it's a pretty complicated topic. It's hard to make voice AI agents work, right? And that's all we have been doing so far. Maybe few key points on the company. So although we're young, 2 years old company, we have raised so far almost 30 million over several rounds. And we have basically serve over 1,000 customers, mainly in US and Europe. And we process roughly 5 million calls per month on our platform at this stage. And excited to deep dive into more specifics.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for covering that off. And I think a good place to kind of dive into some questions is if we cover about how you guys are differentiating, because, there's tons of AI companies out there, for enterprises, it can kind of be hard to distinguish between one and the other. Obviously, you've spoken about LLM's first approach there, which would be good to get into that into a little bit more detail. But speaking off air, we've spoken about how a deployment is kind of a differentiator for you guys. So it'd be great to maybe start off discussing that in greater deal and explain why it's kind of like a time and cost saver in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the interesting things about Synthflow is that we are a no-code platform, and what that actually means in real life is that you can deploy voice AI agents, literally in 5 minutes. So you can go and sign up on Synthflow, and all it takes is to follow like 3 steps, and you have the most basic, I would say, initial setup of the AI agent, right? Of course, depending on the case, on the specifics, right, you can spend more time on that and then test and iterate like the prompts, right, the conversational flow, and then work on integration. So these things may take a bit longer time, but the base setup allows you basically to deploy it that fast, which means, right, it may seem not that great of an advantage for one agent, but imagine you're at some point you're an enterprise, right, and you're deploying thousands of agents across your customer base and use cases, right, and suddenly this becomes a very strong competitive advantage, right, because you don't have to deploy like large teams, right, to deploy this agent. And I think that's like very interesting thing about Synthflow is that we have that. And another thing is the cost base, right? So what I mean by that, it's an open platform. It means companies don't need any upfront costs, right, to get started with Synthflow, as we have seen in the market, right, from more like legacy tech providers. Sometimes you have to have hundreds of thousands upfront commitment, huge workforce, right, both from the provider side, but also in-house, right, to get this thing started and deploy. And each individual case for each individual customer or use case requires this. And at some point it becomes cumbersome and very limiting, right, to scale your AI agent setup. And so that saves you that lot of cost. Plus Synthflow is as a native platform, it means It's extremely affordable. And as an infrastructure provider, we can go as low as 8 cents per minute, right? In some cases, even lower. And that allows companies, right, to rapidly scale this and act on the volume, right, without worrying too much about the margins. I think all these things combined makes Synthflow like very attractive, especially for the companies and the enterprises that have an intention to become voice AI companies themselves, deploy thousands of agents, right, across various use cases and for various customers they have, and build on top of that, right? The last point here that I would mention is this white label component, right, that allows the companies basically to become like, think about the BPO, right? Every BPO nowadays realizes that they are getting disrupted to some degree by AI. That said, quick disclaimer, I don't believe that AI is going to replace human. I think AI is going to augment humans. But that said, there's still some disruption is happening, right, for in conversational AI. And so ultimately, right, BPOs have to make this decision. Either they become AI native themselves or they will be disrupted ultimately. And with Synthflow, right, with this middleware solution, we call it Synthflow Voice AI Operating System. Basically, it's very easy to white label that and build on top of that and deploy thousands of agents and become voice AI companies themselves. And quickly, basically, the technology without having to have like exorbitant in-house investments, build very large team of engineers, right, to solve the nitty-gritty and complicated aspects of voice AI, which is already taken care of from our side and solved.
Yeah, definitely. You've covered up quite a lot there on how you guys differentiate and where you sat in the market. So thank you for that. And I think one good thing to kind of pick out from that is that, you know, you can deploy your AI voice agents in a matter of weeks rather than months. When it comes to kind of like buy-in cycles and implementation cycles, I think, you know, that could go a long way for people to, you know, dip their toes into AI, because when you look at some companies that are, you know, not implementing it, or maybe they've trialed AI, but when it comes to rolling it out, there's still like quite a big gap. And I think the implementation time is part of that. You know, like all of these contact centers, that they're wanting to improve all their statistics continuously, and if you tell them, oh, it's going to take 4 or 5 months to deploy this, you know, that's not going to give them the results that they're after. So deployment time can be a real differentiator that maybe some enterprises don't really consider, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So deployment time is super important in that case, right? But it's also like the scalability issue, right? If you spend 4 months and hundreds of $1,000s, right, to deploy AI agents across like one particular use case, and then suddenly after 2 months, right, the market environment changes. Like think of a BPO or some other company that has to adapt to their customer needs, right? And suddenly the setup is changing. You're back to ground zero, right? Where you have to again invest and then maybe deploy in a different setup with some adjustments. So at some point it becomes economically not viable, right? To constantly have these large teams and huge costs to iterate, to just, right, deploy other cases. And this is where platforms such as Synthflow, right, is so well positioned, right, because you have to do basically this integration one time, integrate it into like the existing telephony system and existing tool set, tech stack, right, which is also very fast with us, right, with the SIP trunking and then versatile API. And after that, all it takes your in-house team is like 5 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on the case, right, to deploy that one assistant, right? And suddenly you're like, it's like infinitely scalable, right? You can literally deploy like thousands of agents within weeks, right, to cover and adjust all the use cases. And I think that flexibility, right, both on the cost side, but also on the scalability side, is what really gives advantage to enterprises, right, to become voice AI companies themselves and don't act as a broker of some black box solution ultimately.
Yeah, definitely. And you've touched on integration there because you can't really talk about fast deployment without talking about the way that you can integrate. So I think it's obviously it's a really good thing that you don't need to alter your existing technology. I think that'll be like quite a sigh of relief for a lot of people, you know, that are implementing different types of AI on their tech stack and CRMs, etc. So why do you think maybe that integration isn't always something that goes that smoothly? Because, you know, for me as an outsider, you know, integration should surely be like the core focus of any company looking to sell their technology into companies that already have a lot of pre-existing tech. So why do you think there's a little bit of a gap in the sector there?
Yeah, look, it's a very good question, right? Because like integrations have always been this, I would say, this area where companies were always a bit wary, right, and cautious, because it may take a lot of time, and ultimately, in some cases, some integrations are not even possible. I think, and we as a company, we realized, we acknowledged basically this challenge very early on. And so the way we have started, and because we're only focused on voice AI, we have decided to build basically an ecosystem around voice AI. What it means is that we also like work on our in-house proprietary telephony system, right? That allows you, gives you way more flexibility, right? But also in cases that you have your own in-house telephony system, right? It's very easy to integrate with Synthflow through an API, but also like with many telephony systems, right? We have a SIP trunking, right? That we already integrate, and we have partnership with all major telephony systems, I would say, that also allows makes the integration of Synthflow with in-house telephony system very seamless, right? So we have been working on it. I think at some point, at some time in the future, right, we'll get to the point where we integrate with almost every major telephony system, right, very easily. And this wide range of this integration capabilities, right, this is what makes integration to the telephony system very, very easy. But that's on the telephony side, right? On the tech stack side, we also integrate with many major CRMs and other tools, right? All of them there, you can find them listed on our website. And it's one of our product strategies that basically every week, right, we integrate with more and more tools out there. And when I say we integrate, it means we have a native integration, right, to some form. And for the tools that we don't have, right, we can always integrate with an API. And so far, we have seen with our customers that integration into their existing ecosystem has not been very challenging, right? We have managed to do that even for publicly listed companies.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for covering that off. I think it's always worth to go into the detail of that, just because I think integration and deployment and scalability, they're all words that can kind of just be like thrown into the, like, you know, humdrum of AI and technology. So it's great to go into a bit more detail on that. And I think as well, like, obviously seeing is believing, and you guys have got loads of use cases on the website. I'll drop a link in the description for everyone watching, because obviously you've referenced people checking out the website. But one use case I thought was particularly interesting was the one on your website with the smart cat. You know, it led to some pretty exciting statistics. So it'd be great if you could kind of cover over some other use cases, maybe, or go into detail on smart cat.
Yeah. So look, basically, it's we serve, like, you can put our customers into 3 buckets very roughly, right? Mm-hmm. So one type of customers have an intention to become voice AI companies themselves, and they want to build on top of Synthflow, right? And this flexibility, right, that I mentioned earlier, both on the cost side, but also like on the integration, but also on the on other parameters, right, allows them to do that very nicely. And what you just mentioned, a couple of case studies, right, on the website exemplify exactly that, right? For the companies that want to have voice AI as part of their offering, as part of their product to their customers, Synthflow is very well suited for them because they don't have to take care and think about very nitty-gritty, complicated technical problems that arise with voice AI, right? Starting from interruptions and latency, right? All this type of problems, but also like actions and so on and so forth. There's like wide array, right? So Synthflow is positioned very well, and plus the cost flexibility allows companies to have a very significant margin on top of this, right? And so this is one type, right? The other case is when companies have a particular use case, right? Or have phone calls and want to automate those. And this is where Synthflow is also deployed, right? We work also with our customers, right, very closely, and deploy Synthflow within the existing ecosystem of the customer so that they can launch assistants in-house, right, for their use cases, right? And the third category of customers are, I would say, contact centers, right? Basically, and BPOs that I mentioned earlier, this type of companies realize that the times are changing, and it is very important to become AI native, right? And what I mean by AI native, it's very important to differentiate here is that these companies have to build their in-house voice AI capabilities because no one knows their customers and use cases better than they do. And there is also, so when it comes to prompting, when it comes to iterating and adjusting voice AI, right, to fit to their customers, they are the experts, right? But at the same time, they have in-house restraints to build this complicated voice AI and solve the technical challenges. So by having Synthflow as a middleware within the organization and really iterating and developing their prompts and in-house knowledge to serve their customers better is the key. And this is where also the margin is justified, right? And this is where I would say is our sweet spot. And what we see, like after also like to comment on the case study you mentioned, we see like after the companies have deployed this into production, we see significant increase in CSAT scores, right, answer rates, and resolution percentages. And what I mean by that is like imagine AI is 24/7, right, and it's even available on weekends, right, where humans don't work. And in these setups, right, naturally the answer rate increases, right, because AI answers even at the after work hours, right, it's constantly available, right, so the answer rate increases, right, and the resolution rates are also increased because like companies are very smart about how they deploy AI. So it's, as I mentioned earlier, AI is not supposed to replace humans, right? It's supposed to augment, and by separating the cases where AI is very well suited, right, to do the calls is actually the key, right? So for mundane, repetitive, and simple tasks, AI is perfect, right? And once you do that, you automatically give more time for human agents, right, to work on more complicated cases, right, where human skills are required. And because humans have now more time to spend on this type of cases, right, the resolution rates and the satisfaction also increases, both from humans, but also like AI covering the simple cases, because it may sound a bit contradictory, but AI is actually turns out to be better than humans, especially for the most repetitive tasks, right? Because it has, it never gets tired, it never gets angry, right? And basically, if it has to schedule an appointment, it just follows through and it does.
Yeah, definitely, and I think as well, like one of the great use cases that is often underexplained is for people like me and you. In the UK, if you go on the high street, post 5 o'clock, everywhere's shut. So if you need to go to the bank, you need to, go to the pharmacy. You need to do all this other stuff. Like 9 out of 10 times, it's shut by the time you finish working. So it almost feels like there's two worlds living in parallel to each other, and AI can kind of bridge that gap. Obviously, you mentioned about kind of that 24/7 service, but like for someone like me, finishes at 5 p.m. I could make a call at 7 p.m. After I've finished my tea. You can really just do life admin at a time where it suits you, because obviously everyone's dead busy, everyone's on different schedules. So I think that's one really underrated use case for AI, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. I mean, I see AI at this stage of the technology very well suited exactly for that type of cases, right? And I call them like the mundane, the repetitive, and in most cases, humans also like would prefer to focus on more complicated, or I would say more human-like interactions, right? Rather than this repetitive tasks, right? And I think it's a great starting point for AI, given the stage of the technology, and it also an area that immediately brings return on investment, right? And we see we see these patterns across the organizations. There's already a wide range of adoption basically happening in different industries, especially for this type of use cases.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just one final talking point before we close off for today's session. It'd be great. Obviously, I think over the last maybe like 2 or 3 years, we've really seen AI just like go take next step. So over the next 5 years, do you think that we're going to be seeing a lot more expansion into AI? Do you think we're going to see the technology itself improving, or do you think we'll kind of like plateau where we get to a level where AI is going to be what AI is always going to be? I mean, it's quite interesting because obviously we speak to loads of people at CX today across the whole spectrum of CX. So it'd be great to hear Synthflow's thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think we have humans have proven to be terrible at predicting the future. And if you asked me 2 years ago, right, when we just got started, that I think the first GPT models were out there, no one expected the improvements to be this fast. Yes, of course, there was always this AGI discussion out there, but like realistically, no one was expecting the rate of improvement to be this fast. And I think we'll still continue having rapid innovation in this area, and I think AI is there to stay for sure, especially for the cases I mentioned. And the rate of adoption is still very low, right? Not because it's just because of time. It's a very new technology. It has just kicked off, right? The companies are just realizing, okay, this is there. And they see like other companies, competitors and peers already having those, right? Business leaders talk to each other, and then they hear from others. There is a return on investment here, very clear, right? And they immediately also want to jump on the ship, right? I think we will see like a rapid adoption of this technology in the next couple of years. I think this will be we'll see this many years, because it's not going to happen overnight. Like very large industries, very large companies, right? It takes time to adopt this technology to its fullest potential, right? Because especially the larger organizations are not that flexible to have an overnight changes, right? So it's going to go through different legal, technical, right, and different adoption cycles. And we'll see this adopting. Will AI become so good that it completely takes over like phone calls or any voice-to-voice interaction? It's hard to say. What I can say is that it's definitely going to cover more complicated use cases in the near future, but I don't think it will be like 100% replacing humans. I think we will converge to this point, like with laptops, like humans work with laptops. I think we'll converge to this point where humans work with voice AI and together, right? and are way more productive, and they may even cover use cases that are currently not covered, right? And I think that's the interesting thing about this technology. But one thing for sure is the companies that have to hurry up to already start with this process, right? Because these things take time. And I think it's a great point right now for this technology to start adopting. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that, and that's all we've got time for today, unfortunately. But you know, we've had a lot you've given a lot for us to think about in the conversation there. So yeah, really glad to have you on the platform with us today, and for all of our audience to hear more about Synthflow, the journey that you guys are on. So yeah, thanks again to yourself, Hakob, and thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to another episode. As mentioned, I'll drop a link in the comments below for your website for anyone wanting to go check Synthflow out. But until next time, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.